Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Huska. I am a Caucasian male. I am wearing a white shirt and I have dark brown hair or dark blonde hair. Um, to describe my poster a little bit, and the environment that I'm in. So the poster takes up the full screen. I am in the bottom corner, and the poster is over my shoulder. The writing on the poster, the heading is blue, and the writing underneath of it is pink and purple with two graphs in the top right corner, one being a pie graph and another being a bar chart. So now I will start my presentation. The title of my presentation and my research paper is Gender Norms and Athletic Participation by Daniel Huska. Just to give a little introduction over this topic, um, it examines how gender norms and structural inequalities shape sports participation for athletes, specifically women in this research paper, not genders as a whole. To kind of narrow down the scope of research, it focuses on women specifically. The gap in research that it is trying to be filled, not by this research specifically that is being found, but in for future goals is that there's not existing research that quantifies how much participation rates are affected by gender norms and structural inequalities. There's a lot of qualitative data saying that it is, however, not how much. And the goal is to understand how the environment impacts participation um, for women. So, the hypothesis for this research paper in this research specifically is sports participation and enjoyment are significantly shaped by the interplay of structural inequalities and gender norms. This is super important. And um, to kind of dive into the materials that were used for this research was peer-reviewed articles published 2020 and after. The main goal was to make sure that these findings and the data that is being used is still relevant. This is because people's opinions and preferences change as time goes on, based on their environment. So it's very important that there's still relevant information based on whether it be legalities that have been passed and things like that that have limited female or limited women, excuse me. And so it was super important that we use recent data. So qualitative data was used, surveys and case studies, and then quantitative data. And one example, this is participation rates. There's other kinds of um, quantitative data that is being used. However, participation rates is a big one. And then methods that were used, mixed methods approach, qualitative data and quantitative data is both used to come to the conclusion to make sure that our findings are accurate and to lead to future research. And then constructionist framework. So this is really important because this study is based off the belief that gender is constructed by society. It is different than male or female. So um, it's that is super important in this research when focusing just on women and not genders as a whole, and not the whole and like all genders specifically. So it's just focusing on women. So, and then another method, it compared participation across environments. This is super important, as we'll talk about in the findings. Environment is super crucial to making sure that these findings are accurate because the environment that one is in shapes their preferences. And then the graph. So the first one is titled Media Coverage. Men's media coverage is 80% of what we see on the media. So women are much less than that, taking up only 20%. And this is super important because the media shapes the way that individuals think. So when considering um, preferences, considering participation rates, it is super important to consider the ideas, the things that are being shown to individuals online and through our media, because that is a big telling factor of preferences in today's society. And then jobs for men and women is the title of the second. This is the bar graph. The percentage is labeled on the y-axis, and sports industry and caretaking is labeled on the x-axis. So the first bar representing men, it is a pinkish red bar. It goes up to 70% of jobs in the sports industry are for men, and 30% of jobs in the sports industry are women, represented by a turquoise blue bar. This is super important because when comparing it to caretaking taking jobs, 50-50 is the distribution of men and women in that field. This is super important because it shows the marginalization of women in sports industry, and this affects that way that um, women participate, because when having roles in the sports industry, it controls the funding, the opportunities that women get, and it is super important to participation rates, because if women are not experiencing equality, they are not going to be as inclined to participate. And then they also will not be having opportunity in as a whole, so they may not even have the opportunity to participate. And then findings, participation is not just personal choice; it is shaped by the things around us, the environment that we're in, and then media, leadership expectations, social expectations, and gender norms play a big role in participation as well. And then equity limits opportunities inequality, excuse me, limits opportunities for women. So this is super important because obviously we want equity, we inequality for all people, all genders, so that everybody can experience that same opportunity. The limitations for a study moving forward is that it varies by environment. This is super crucial because it's hard to quantify data when it's not easy to generalize to a population. It would be super important that there is many different studies done specifying on individual environments and not trying to overgeneralize. So if you want to a study on this specific research topic, you would have to just study one environment of um, those people that are being studied. And then many studies already rely on qualitative data. This is problematic because that you cannot say how much without using quantitative data. So that would be something that would be super crucial to obtain. And the next steps moving forward, more quantitative data needs to be used for the following reason, or the previous reason, and then study different environments more closely, which was already discussed, and that would need to be done to assure accurate data. To kind of go over the sources that I used, Chalet and others, perceptions of experiences of Generation Z in sports, Michaela Duffer, gender marginalization in sports participation, Matthew Heineman, gender inequality of sports organizations, Ruth Jeans, gender inequality of community sports clubs, and women in sports. Where are all the women? And then Ongru Zhu and others, men's sports versus women's sports. So those are the sources that I use to come to the conclusions, to write my research paper, and to make this presentation here for you all. So I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day. Thank you.